Hi, I'm Gail. Thank you for joining me on the Secular Scriptures. Miss Possum is also joining us today, and I am sick, so I'm very wheezy, so just bear with me. I've really struggled with Genesis chapter 16 to 18, verse 15 on multiple levels. This is the first part of Hagar's story, the origins of circumcision, and more divine promises of wildly geriatric pregnancies. So right here is your content warning for all kinds of abuse, assault, slavery, and images that will make a modern person wince. I've put timestamps in the description box below, but if you need to skip this one, we can catch up in Sodom and Gomorrah for a totally different kind of traumatic experience. Hopefully I'll be feeling better by then. If you are here for the reading and don't want to stick around for the discussion, feel free to run away to the next video. But if you'd like to learn about Abrahamic lore along with me, do stay for the history, literary analysis, comparative mythology, and conflicts, contradictions, and controversies. And oh my sweet baby boy, do we have some conflicts today. Before you let apologetics run away with you in the comments, think about where you are going and kindly refrain from engaging in non-consensual proselytizing. I am not a biblical scholar. I just love these stories. I especially love Hagar's story. Now, bring enough of your favorite beverage to last through this reading about God taking his sweet time. Now Sarai, Abram's wife, bore him no children. She had a servant, an Egyptian, whose name was Hagar. Sarai said to Abram, "See now, Yahweh has restrained me from bearing. Please go into my servant. It may be that I will obtain children by her." Abram listened to the voice of Sarai. Sarai, Abram's wife, took Hagar the Egyptian, her servant, after Abram had lived 10 years in the land of Canaan, and gave her to Abram, her husband, to be his wife. He went in to Hagar, and she conceived. When she saw that she had conceived, her mistress was displeased in her eyes. Sarai said to Abram, "This wrong is your fault. I gave my servant into your bosom, and when she saw that she had conceived, she despised me. May Yahweh judge between me and you." But Abram said to Sarai, "Behold, your maid is in your hand. Do to her whatever is good in your eyes." Sarai dealt harshly with her, and she fled from her face. Yahweh's angel found her by a fountain of water in the wilderness, by the fountain on the way to Shur. He said, "Hagar, Sarai's servant, where did you come from? Where are you going?" She said, "I am fleeing from the face of my mistress Sarai." Yahweh's angel said to her, "Return to your mistress and submit yourself under her hands." Yahweh's angel said to her, "I will greatly multiply your offspring, that they may not be counted for multitude." Yahweh's angel said to her, "Behold, you are with child, and will bear a son. You shall call his name Ishmael, because Yahweh has heard your affliction. He will be like a wild donkey among men. His hand will be against every man, and every man's hand against him. He will live opposed to all his brothers." She called the name of Yahweh who spoke to her. "You are a God who sees," for she said, "Have I even stayed alive after seeing him?" Therefore the well was called Bir Lahai Roi. Behold, it is between Kadesh and Bered. Hagar bore a son for Abram. Abram called the name of his son, whom Hagar bore, Ishmael. Abram was 86 years old when Hagar bore Ishmael to Abram. When Abram was 99 years old, Yahweh appeared to Abram and said to him, "I am God Almighty. Walk before me and be blameless. I will make my covenant between me and you, and will multiply you exceedingly." Abram fell on his face. God talked with him, saying, "As for me, behold, my covenant is with you. You will be the father of a multitude of nations. Your name will no more be called Abram, but your name will be Abraham, for I have made you the father of a multitude of nations. I will make you exceedingly fruitful, and I will make nations of you. Kings will come out of you. I will establish my covenant between me and you and your offspring after you throughout their generations, and for an everlasting covenant, to be a God to you and to your offspring after you. I will give to you and to your offspring after you the land where you are traveling, all the land of Canaan, for an everlasting possession. I will be their God." God said to Abraham, "As for you, you shall keep my covenant, you and your offspring after you throughout their generations. This is my covenant, which you shall keep between me and you and your offspring after you. Every male among you shall be circumcised. You shall be circumcised in the flesh of your foreskin. It will be a token of the covenant between me and you. He who is 8 days old shall be circumcised among you, every male throughout your generations. He who is born in the house or bought with money from any foreigner who is not of your offspring. He who is born in your house and he who is bought with your money must be circumcised. My covenant shall be in your flesh for an everlasting covenant. The uncircumcised male who is not circumcised in the flesh of his foreskin, that soul shall be cut off from his people. He has broken my covenant." God said to Abraham, "As for Sarai your wife, you shall not call her Sarai, but her name shall be Sarah. I will bless her, and moreover I will give you a son by her. Yes, I will bless her, and she will be a mother of nations. Kings of peoples will come from her." Then Abraham fell on his face and laughed, and said in his heart, "Will a child be born to him who is 100 years old? Will Sarah, who is 90 years old, give birth?" Abraham said to God, "Oh, that Ishmael might live before you." God said, "No, but Sarah your wife will bear you a son. You shall call his name Isaac. I will establish my covenant with him for an everlasting covenant for his offspring after him. As for Ishmael, I have heard you. Behold, I have blessed him, and will make him fruitful, and will multiply him exceedingly. He will become the father of 12 princes, and I will make him a great nation. But I will establish my covenant with Isaac, whom Sarah will bear to you at this set time next year." When he finished talking with him, God went up from Abraham. Abraham took Ishmael his son, all who were born in his house, and all who were bought with his money, every male among the men of Abraham's house, and circumcised the flesh of their foreskin in the same day as God had said to him. Abraham was 99 years old when he was circumcised in the flesh of his foreskin. Ishmael, his son, was 13 years old when he was circumcised in the flesh of his foreskin. In the same day both Abraham and Ishmael, his son, were circumcised. All the men of his house, those born in the house, and those bought with money from a foreigner, were circumcised with him. Chapter 18. Yahweh appeared to him by the oaks of Mamre as he sat in the tent door in the heat of the day. He lifted up his eyes and looked, and saw that 3 men stood near him. When he saw them, he ran to meet them from the tent door, and bowed himself to the earth, and said, "My Lord, if now I have found favor in your sight, please don't go away from your servant. Or now let a little water be fetched, wash your feet, and rest yourself under the tree. I will get a piece of bread, and you can refresh your heart. After that you may go your way, now that you have come to your servant." They said, "Very well, do as you have said." Abraham hurried into the tent to Sarah, and said, "Quickly prepare 3 shayes of fine meal, knead it, and make cakes." Abraham ran to the herd, and fetched a tender and good calf, and gave it to the servant. He hurried to dress it. He took butter, milk, the calf which he had dressed, and set it before them. He stood by them under the tree, and they ate. They asked him, "Where is Sarah your wife?" He said, "There, in the tent." He said, "I will certainly return to you at about this time next year, and behold, Sarah your wife will have a son." Sarah heard in the tent door which was behind him. Now Abraham and Sarah were old, well advanced in age. Sarah had passed the age of childbearing. Sarah laughed within herself, saying, "After I have grown old will I have pleasure, my Lord being old also." Yahweh said to Abraham, "Why did Sarah laughing say, 'Will I really bear a child when I am old?' Is anything too hard for Yahweh? At the set time I will return to you when the seasons come around, and Sarah will have a son." Then Sarah denied it, saying, "I didn't laugh," for she was afraid. He said, "No, but you did laugh." I love Hagar. The woman does not quit. Life threw her the worst: slavery, exile, a forced marriage, physical abuse. And later on, her and her child are cast out into the wilderness where they almost die, and she does not give up. She wants to, but then she picks herself up and she does what needs doing. Also, Hagar names God. She's the only person in the Bible to ever name God. So, let's hear it for Hagar, mother of nations. Don't you kind of hate Sarah right now? I kind of hate Sarah right now. Abram. Abraham, my good man. Sometimes being a super chill dude is the wrong answer. You've got a spine, sir. Use it. God. On so many levels, my dude. This is culty behavior. You're supposed to be the God of the universe. You can do better. It's only going to get worse from here. I have some channel recommendations for you. So the first one is Legends of History, Hagar and Ishmael, Bible Stories Explained. She does have a little bit of apologetics in there. It's really not bad. I liked her analysis of the story. She goes over the entire Hagar, Ishmael, Christian mythos. The next one is Hagar film, Hagar and the One Who Sees, Arabic short film. I have a typo in here that is very funny. It says the one who wheeze. It's a beautiful film. It is in Arabic. It has English subtitles. Highly recommend watching it. I cried my eyeballs out. It was gorgeous. The next one is just a general channel recommendation. It's Unreligiously. She's awesome. She's thoughtful. Go watch her. The last one, you may or may not want to click on it, is a medical tutorial from Nucleus Medical Media, Circumcision /Nucleus Health. If you don't want to know how circumcisions are done on babies today, don't watch that video. I'm not going to address the circumcision of the heart stuff at this time, as that's the focus of Christianity in the New Testament. I think it's better to save it for when we get to the New Testament. And while I have plenty to say about the divine picnic, Sarah's angel food cake was a bait and switch. It has no angel food cake recipe. There is a recipe for beef and yogurt sauce tacos on the Bible Cookbook website. The translation for the recipe is 96 cups of flour. That would make a lot of soft tacos, probably enough for your whole church if you were so inclined. History of the text. Chapter 16 is written by the Yahweh source, 900s BCE, arguably 500s BCE at this point. There's like scholarly debate, blah, blah, blah. This was the Kingdom of Judah. Chapter 17 was written by the priestly source very distinctly in the 500s BCE, either in Babylon or in the post-exilic period. Chapter 18, we go back to the Yahweh source in the 900s/500s, debatable either way. And if this is just my opinion, I have no actual historic basis for this, so just take this for what it is. I don't think that we're looking at the same J author in chapter 16 as in chapter 18. The point of view has shifted from objective to limited, well, third-person objective to third-person limited. And the cadence is a little bit different. It has a different storytelling feel to it, with more descriptive words and a more vivid sense of the setting. Yahweh is presented in a patron or companion role here, instead of a parental or authoritarian role, which we have previously encountered in the J sources. As I've mentioned before, it's my understanding that each of the JEPD plus R sources are not single individuals, so this doesn't really disrupt the documentary, supplementary, whatever the heck they're calling it now, hypothesis of authorship, but the narrator's voice is important in the stories from a literary point of view. 18 feels, has that literary feel to it, like it's either being told by someone who really wanted us to like Abraham and Sarah, or for some reason, more personality and descriptive words were added in here in this chapter, but not in others at a later date. Literary analysis. We will start with characters. In our speaking roles, we have Sarai, Sarah. Is it K? Sarah? All right. Hagar, Abram, Abraham, the angel of the Lord / God, and then God. In non-speaking roles, we have Ishmael, Abram's men, the two angels of God, and various servants. In chapter 16, it's in Abram's camp under the oaks of Mamre near Hebron, and then it moves with Hagar to a spring on the way to Shur / the well of Bir Lahai Roi between Kadesh and Bered, and then back to the camp at Mamre for chapter 17 and 18. Abram, or Abraham, is 86 to 99 years old. Ishmael goes from conception to 13 years old. So this is over a 13-ish time span. And Sarai, Sarah, is 76 to 89 years old. Point of view. Chapter 16 is told from the third person objective. It describes what the characters say and do, but not how they feel or what they think. Chapters 17 and 18 are in the third person limited with a caveat there. 17 describes what God says and does, and what Abram / Abraham feels, says, and does. In 18, the narrator describes what Abraham and his three guests do and say, and what Sarah thinks and feels. This is the first solid evidence of God being able to read minds in the Bible. We've had hints of it before, but it has never been specifically stated. We also get introduced to God's sense of humor in joking with this older couple about doubting the impossible. As a whole, chapter 18 should probably be classified as the third person omniscient, because later it says how other characters think and feel. Plot summary. Good and gentle, folks. This is what happens in the Bible when you don't trust God's trust me bro, pinky swear, even when it seems impossible. Slave girls get non-consensually knocked up by geriatric patriarchs, old wives get jealous, there are unnecessary beatdowns, and it all ends in tears out in the middle of the desert, and that's just chapter 16. Then folks lose important bits of their body, God brings friends over for a picnic, says a bunch of ridiculous and biologically impossible stuff, which is laughable, and every OB on earth is cringing at the thought of managing that geriatric pregnancy right now. Literary devices. We have some thematic elements. Thematic elements are underlying messages, ideas, or concepts that are expressed in a work of literature. Example, love, family, coming of age, the hero's journey. So there are three main thematic elements. The first one is suffering as a virtue. Hagar is among the 10-ish women in the Bible that God speaks to directly, but she is the only person to give God a name, which is El Roi, meaning the God who sees me. So God sees and acknowledges Hagar's suffering, but then tells her to go back to Sarai, who is the cause of her suffering, and endure it. We also have the themes of obedience and fidelity in Hagar's story. The next one is God's time. The moral of the story is that God will do things when he darn well pleases, usually in ways that are out of the ordinary, because God likes to boost his divine reputation. Wouldn't do to have a young woman get pregnant. That's just a Friday night. No. He's got to pull a divine magic trick. I want to note that in past chapters, a 90-year-old woman getting pregnant would not have been unusual, and all of Abraham's progenitors, except for Nahor, outlive him sometimes by centuries, presumably continuing to have children with their wives who also outlive him by centuries. Hospitality. The divine picnic is an early example of the importance of hospitality. This is going to come up again in the second half of chapter 18 and will continue to be important throughout the rest of the Old Testament. And it is a core tenet of Judaism today. And in my opinion, it is one of the most important themes, and it is a healthy one, up to a point. Lot's going to reach that point and then pass it. One little element of symbolism, which is Ishmael which means God hears, and he is compared to a wild donkey. It's important to understand cultural traditions in these cases because for us, a donkey is like stubborn, sometimes mean, difficult to handle, that type of thing, which maybe Ishmael is. But to the ancient Israelites, this was freedom, resilience, and the ability to survive in harsh environments. And because Ishmael is considered the father of the Arabic people, and they were living in a desert, harsh environment, this sort of fits him perfectly, right? Character motivation is the reasons behind a character's actions, decisions, and behaviors in a story. Sarai wants Abram to have a child. Since she's the one who is barren, she comes up with the idea to use Hagar as a surrogate, which was legal under the codes of Hammurabi and the laws in Canaan at that point in time. Once the possibility became a reality, jealousy, pride, anger, shame, and blame overtake her. Sarai acts wrongly in chapter 16, both when she sex traffics Hagar and when she abuses her to assert dominance and reclaim her status. Blaming Abram when this was her idea is also an issue. And that blame was likely fueled by jealousy and guilt, not just status. But those are all assumptions, as the text does not say. On the mystical level, she's not trusting God to keep his promise. Granted, there was no mention of her in that promise at that point. In chapter 18, we get to see Sarah's sense of humor and boldness. While she does not run out to meet God and the angels, she stands by the tent door listening in because she really wants to know what's going on. She half lies, claiming that she didn't laugh out loud out of fear, but it would be reasonable to doubt the unrealistic claims of a baby after a lifetime of infertility and then menopause. Abraham really leans into his non-confrontational qualities in chapter 16, and again shows us his loose definition of marriage. This is not the first nor the last time that he pays no regard to the consent of women in his power. And regardless of what their personal relationship was like, Hagar, being a slave, cannot give consent, which makes this rape by power structure alone. Abram again lets Hagar down when he demotes her from wife and mother back to slave the moment there is domestic strife. He makes no attempt to help resolve the issue peacefully. He just evades responsibility like he had no part in creating the problem. Adam. He stepped up a tiny bit when she came back and had Ishmael, but it's not going to last. In chapter 17, Abram, always willing to do whatever bonkers thing God asks of him, sets to snipping all of his slaves and kinsmen in one day. Being the conflict-avoidant peacekeeper that he is, I cannot imagine how that conversation went down. Again, the text doesn't say. Can you blame it? In chapter 18, Abraham is the good host and shows reverence, submissiveness, and care for the free will of the angels and God to the point of fawning. He is upholding the power structures here. It's entirely possible that he was also panicking. Abraham proves that he does indeed have a spine in there somewhere when he questions God about how Sarah can have a child at their age, and when he pleads Ishmael's case. It's important to remember that Hagar has no choice in anything that happens to her. Sarai and Abram are within their legal rights to marry her off, use her body to get a child, and to abuse her. If Abram truly treated her as a co-equal wife, then it would be understandable that she'd act like one, thinking that she had the rights and status of the mother of the patriarch's future firstborn child. Considering the cultural context of the time and the emphasis on fertility, her attitude may not have been very nice, but it was understandable. Regardless, to have that wife status ripped away and be instantly demoted back to slave and abused to the point that she couldn't stand it and ran away, that's really hard. Hagar doesn't know where she's going. She's alone, pregnant, and without the protection of a settlement. I cannot even begin to imagine how hopeless she felt when the angel told her to go back to Sarai. Then she's promised a future, and she trusts that promise. What she felt in the moments when she saw God and knew that God saw her, the text does not really say. Whatever it was, she stopped running and upheld her end of the social contract, crappy though it was. The story leaves off with Ishmael's birth and the correct name being given was relayed to Abram by God or by Hagar. Again, the text doesn't say. God. Oh God. Who can guess the motivations of this God? In chapter 16, God sent an angel, or himself, or Jesus maybe, to shoo Hagar back to Sarai and Abram for a reason that only God knows. But he actually shows up for her, and he gives her the same deal that he gave Abram regarding their descendants. This is a big deal, and our girl Hagar does not get nearly enough myth cred, in my opinion. Chapter 17. Oh, God. Seriously. All the patron deities are fine and dandy, but do you really need amputated cock rings as your symbol of devotion? Really? This is one big dick joke to you, isn't it? Which angel did you make that bet with that time? Or God goes about handing out new names to adult humans. So FYI, changing your birth name is biblical. I don't know what people are freaking out about these days. Abram means exalted father, and Abraham means father of many nations. It wasn't a big change. Sarai means my princess, or contentious, and Sarah means princess with a wider connotation than the diminutive of her former name. Isaac means he will laugh, or laughter, because God has a sense of humor about these things. In chapter 18, God and his angel friends are feeling peckish on their way to do a bit of urban annihilation, so he stops to see his buddy Abraham for a little picnic under the oaks. At this point, he offers a 1-year timeline for his promised pregnancy, 25 years in the making. When his pet people both laugh at the absurdity, God calls them on it, but with good humor. In verse 9, God asks where Sarah is. I'm not entirely sure if he was wanting her to come out of the tent or if he was just making sure she was listening. Please note that God never once condemns the couple for adding Hagar to the mix. While Ishmael doesn't quite make the cut for the show at the Divine County Fair, little Yahweh is fine with sending him off to start his own human line in a side project. Comparative Mythology. Just a note on my comparative mythology things. I'm not claiming that any of the stories that I'm comparing these things to are directly related to them. What I'm looking at is themes within storytelling. So I just wanted to make that clear. Hera's wrath versus Sarah's jealousy and anger. So again, we're back to the Greeks. In the story of Leto, goddess of childhood and motherhood, old Zeus is back to his philandering ways, and wife Hera, goddess of marriage and childbirth, is none too happy about yet another pregnant paramour and decides to go after this rival goddess. Hera curses Leto to not be able to give birth on terra firma, and also sends 2 monsters, a giant and a serpent, children of Gaia, to attack her. Leto flees to the floating island of Thelos, spelled D-E-L-O-S, but it's Thelos. Her transformed sister, who escaped Zeus's advances by becoming part of the landscape and thus gaining Hera's approval. Where Hera further delays the birth of the twins Artemis and Apollo by preventing the goddess of childbirth from attending. Iris comes to the rescue and brings Eileithyia, allowing Leto's labor to end. As soon as the twins are born, they drive off or slay the attackers Python and Tityus, and defend their mother in many other ways over the years. Much like Hagar's return, Leto is welcomed onto Olympus as a goddess, along with her children, though unlike Hagar, she is never cast out again. Different versions say that she was Zeus's 6th wife, directly before Hera, incurring Hera's jealousy that way. Then, we go on to religious genital mutilation. Yay! I mentioned the cult of Cybele and Attis, practiced in Phrygia a few videos ago. There was a practice of self-castration and flagellation as signs of devotion to the agricultural god and the earth goddess. While this is certainly more extreme than circumcision, both of these religious practices will filter into Christianity in the late Roman and early Middle Ages. So we'll see them again. The long-awaited or promised child. No stories for right now. We have Rapunzel and the Snow Child for Ishmael, and Snow White and Sleeping Beauty for Isaac. I will not be telling any stories here, but we'll definitely talk about both of the boys and these story elements when we get to their parts of the story. Conflicts, contradictions, and controversies. So we have a lot of conflicting information between different religions and denominations regarding these characters. Amazingly, there are no contradictions in this part of the story. Like, it doesn't contradict itself, which is really cool because it's very rare. Conflicts between different religions as to what these characters did, who they were, etc. Here we go. Who was Hagar? Some Jewish traditions say that Hagar was Pharaoh's daughter, given to Sarai as her handmaid upon their marriage. Others say that she was a foreign princess taken as a prisoner of war to become a palace slave, which Pharaoh had charge over, and therefore the ability to distribute as he wished. Both versions give her an elevated status by birth and a slave status by circumstances. Was Hagar a slave, a servant, a maid, a concubine, or a wife? How to get a child from a slave in Egypt or pre-Israel. Both the Code of Hammurabi and the Bible say that a female slave owner could use her female slaves as surrogates if she could not have her own children, which we'll see happen again soon. The reality was that any child born of a female slave was also a slave unless they were formally adopted or freed under special circumstances. The female slave was never held accountable for these children while she was unmarried. She was held blameless for that because she could not consent. If a man owned female slaves, any sons he produced through her were not his heirs, they were his slaves. So while Sarai gives Hagar to Abram as his wife, Hagar retains the dual status of a slave. It's unclear if Sarai ever adopted Ishmael or if he retained slave status. But because Sarai eventually sends them both away, we can assume that Abram/Abraham either never formally adopted his son or he was unable to, because it would have been Sarai's job to adopt him. Judaism leaves Hagar in this zone of uncertain status. Islam has Hagar firmly in the place of a proper wife. Christianity denies her the place of a proper wife because they hold to one man, one woman. What I find very interesting is how the different versions of the Bible soften Hagar's slave status into that of a maid or servant, and others are forthright about her state of bondage. Just to be clear, I looked at different translations of Genesis 16 verse 2 on Bible Gateway for this little graphic here. So while I popped that image up a few times during the reading, it doesn't necessarily carry through for all of the verses that I used it to reference for. Again, I'm not a Bible scholar, I didn't check the Hebrew, and I wouldn't know how to interpret it if I did. I did want to make it clear that this woman was a slave and not an employee free to do as she wished. God does not condemn Abram or Sarai for holding slaves at any point. He just instructs what to do with them and reinforces the status quo. Hagar's name means stranger, foreigner, the immigrant, or to flee. Hagar is a Hebrew name, not an Egyptian name. So the assumption is that Sarai gave her that name. While this is skipping ahead, Hagar is often associated with Keturah, at Abraham's third wife. The theory being that after Sarah's death, Isaac brought Hagar, Keturah being her real name, back to Abraham to remarry. It is disagreed upon among the three religions and various denominations if Hagar and Keturah are the same person. Why did God send Hagar back? The Bible is unclear. We can extract some reasons from the context. On a plain reading of the text, it's to preserve the social order. The angel tells Hagar to go back and submit to her mistress. On face value, this is God endorsing slavery, and sexual slavery at that, and modern readers really struggle with this. Apologists may say, it may have been so much worse in Egypt, and there is textual support for that. She was sent away after God cursed Pharaoh. Everything in association with Abram's house was removed from Egypt to remove the curse. I doubt she'd have a warm welcome with Abraham's baby in her belly, even if she was Pharaoh's daughter. From a historical point of view, a pregnant slave woman alone in the desert would have a high chance of either dying or being taken captive elsewhere. This was not a time of easy social mobility or cultural integration. The next level of inference is that God wants Ishmael to grow up with Abram/Abraham, and in chapter 17 he is circumcised with all of the other men. Hagar did what she was told. She fulfilled her social role. Sarai and Abram blurred the lines between wife and slave, creating confusion and harm. And yet again, God shielded Abram from his own mistakes, at least for now. Controversies. I know you know this one's coming. Slavery is bad. Slavery is bad. Using a slave as a surrogate is bad. This is a major failing in the Bible, and something that modern Christians have to deal with in their faith. The excuse of, his ways are higher, and he had to meet people where they were. It's a cop-out, and everybody knows it, including the people who are saying it. In fact, there is a not small population here in the U.S. who'd love to get back to the Bible in that regard and own other humans. Do not underestimate the dangers of Christian nationalism and their ability to use text as a sword. Slaves cannot consent. This is the issue of slavery and power dynamics. It is unethical for a teacher to start a romantic relationship with their student regardless of age, and for a boss to get involved with an employee, and for a religious leader to fall for a member of their congregation. It doesn't mean that these things don't happen, but the correct thing to do is to sever the power tie by transferring to a different job, or don't get involved in that relationship. This is the only way to avoid coercion. The issue with slavery is that the relationship is always coerced. It doesn't matter if both parties are wildly in love, or if it's an illusion built out of fear on the slave's part. Since there is no legal room for consent, consent cannot be given freely. See Thomas Jefferson and Sally Hemings, for example. Loyalty tests. Loyalty tests in friendship refer to situations or behaviors exhibited by one friend that challenge the other's commitment to trust and dedication to the friendship. These tests can be overt or subtle and may arise from various motivations, including insecurity, jealousy, or a desire for reassurance. In a romantic relationship, a loyalty test is an act of manipulation that a person does to see whether their partner is loyal, example, not open to infidelity or cheating. In religious cults, not that cults have to be religious, loyalty tests are manipulative tactics designed to exploit psychological vulnerabilities and create a powerful hold over individuals, ultimately serving the interests of the leader, God, priests, etc., and the group above the well-being of its members. Loyalty test tactics may include things like isolation, severing family or friend ties, financial exploitation, dress codes, dietary restrictions, or physical mutilation like branding, tattoos, scarification, amputation, etc., punishing questions or doubts, sleep deprivation, malnutrition, overwork, an us versus them mentality, threat of exile or damnation for leaving, love bombing, gaslighting, and more. In this story, God acts like a high-demand cult leader. He tells Hagar to go back to an abusive situation, promising that things will be much better in the distant future. He's making unrealistic promises there. He tells Abraham that all of the men must mutilate their genitals as the sign of devotion or face exile from the group. Later, which we haven't gotten to this, but I'm listing it anyway, he backs Sarah in her demand that Abram cast Hagar and Ishmael out, effectively losing his firstborn son, which is an example of cutting off a family member, technically two family members. And then God demands that Abraham sacrifice Isaac. Demanding that you commit murder for one of your followers is not a good thing. Oddly, Sarai is not directly asked to harm her family, but quite frankly, God endangers her life and well-being with a geriatric pregnancy. Another extraordinary claim. Though maybe he felt bad about what her husband did to her regarding the two kings. The second one hasn't happened yet. So perhaps he considered that enough suffering. God keeps asking the progenitors of his people to do difficult and sadistic things in the name of obedience. Trust would be the word used in religious circles, but I'm not going to be that generous to this character. When modern readers take an objective look at this text, God is often depicted as evil, narcissistic, and criminally negligent. Let's talk about circumcision. Male circumcision is where part or all of the foreskin of a male human's penis is cut off, leaving the glands partially or totally exposed. In the Bible, the sign of the agreement between God and Abraham, land of Canaan plus many descendants, you worship God, is a snip tip. The method used was to pull and cut, leaving a ring of skin and an open wound that would be bandaged and heal in about 2 weeks. It's a fast method of removal, and if the blade was sharp, it wouldn't hurt until a few seconds after the deed was done. As we'll see, this will become blood magic, a war crime, a battle trophy, a way to get a wife, and a power play as the Bible stories go on. Historically, it becomes a way to set the Israelite people apart. While they weren't the only ones to practice circumcision, it was so widespread in Jewish society by the Roman era that male prisoners were stripped to confirm their religion. When Christianity developed, the Greek influence left the church divided on the practice, which fell out of favor for a while. It has been more and less popular over the centuries. In the U.S., circumcision is a common cultural practice where 58% of boys are circumcised today as babies. This is down from 70% 15 years ago. Worldwide estimates are around 38%, with the highest rates in Central Africa to help limit the spread of HIV, and in North Africa and Western Asia for religious reasons. The lowest rates of circumcision are in Europe, East Asia, and South America. The practice is generally regarded as safe, but it is not universally accepted. Benefits of circumcision include a slight reduction in the risk of UTIs in infants and a reduction of HIV transmission in adults when used with other preventative measures like antivirals and condoms. There is also a slight reduction in the risk of penile cancer and cervical cancer due to HPV, but we have a vaccine that is far more effective against that now. Many people, myself included, consider circumcision to be genital mutilation and abhorrent for that reason. There are medical risks for both infants and adults: bleeding, infection, scar tissue, pain, narrowing of the urethra, which requires more surgery. It's painful afterwards and may be done without anesthetic depending. There is also the issue of consent. A baby or child cannot consent to losing part of their sex organ. This is different for grown men. They have the ability to give informed consent. Many men suffer lifelong pain due to scar tissue, uneven healing, or not having enough room left in their penis skin for a full erection. Sometimes this can be corrected with surgery, which involves skin flaps and a multi-stage reconstruction process. But many men will never address it with their medical providers and will suffer in silence their entire lives. There is a connection between infant circumcision and body organ trafficking. Yes, really. Infant foreskins are used in medical research for skin grafts and in the cosmetics industry. Yes, you may very well be putting baby boy foreskin cells on your face. Yes, hospitals may have an economic incentive for pushing you to circumcise your baby boy. No, they are not making millions from the foreskins, but their associates are. This raises all sorts of issues around who owns genetic material, consent for tissue use, and who gets to profit from human body parts. Also of note is that most insurance won't cover this cosmetic procedure, so it's an out-of-pocket expense for new parents, thankfully. In traditional Jewish circumcision, there is the problem of spreading disease. Metzitza bipe is when the mohel uses their mouth to suck blood away from the wound as part of the baby's circumcision ritual. This puts infants at high risk for contracting herpes simplex 1, which may be completely asymptomatic in the adult, so the mohel has no idea that they carry it. This infection can lead to brain damage, lifelong disability, or death, as newborns can't fight off the effects of the virus. Just because it's traditional doesn't mean it's safe, so just be aware of that. I have questions, you have answers. What do you think of the relationship dynamics between Sarai, Abram, and Hagar? Why do you think God told Hagar to go back? What is your opinion on circumcision? Is this something you feel strongly about in either direction, or not something you've ever considered before? Why do you think God delayed Sarah's pregnancy for so long? Which literary or historic elements did I miss? Tell me in the comments. Was I too nice to Abraham? I was too nice to Abraham, wasn't I? Thank you so much for joining me today on the Secular Scriptures. I know there were some rough subjects in this video, and I probably smiled right through them, but if you stuck with it, please like and subscribe. We will visit Hagar and Ishmael soon, and then again in the New Testaments in Galatians 4. I hope you'll come back next time for some more PTSD-inducing tales in Fire and Brimstone, the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. And hopefully I will be feeling much better by then.